Nathan Blackwood never lost a bet. That was the simple truth everyone in his elite circle understood. He was a man who played to win, whether in business, in life, or in the twisted games he entertained among his wealthy peers. That night, as he stood on the rooftop terrace of an exclusive club, whiskey in hand, his reputation remained untarnished. But then Michael Carter, an old friend with a devilish smile and a penchant for cruelty, leaned in with a challenge that would alter everything. "Yulay. Think you're untouchable, Nathan. That money can buy you anything." Nathan took a slow sip of his drink, his lips barely curving into a smirk. "Because it can." Michael chuckled, swirling his own glass. "Then prove it. I'll make it interesting." He gestured toward the street below, where a lone figure sat hunched against the cold pavement. A woman, barefoot, wrapped in threadbare clothing, her hair tangled and wild. She was the kind of person men like Nathan and Michael never looked at, just another ghost among the forgotten. Nathan's gaze flickered downward. He didn't see a person. He saw an opportunity. Michael leaned closer, his voice a low taunt. "Marry her." Nathan raised a brow, more amused than shocked. "Marry her? For 3 months. Take her in. Turn her into one of us. Make her presentable. If you can keep up the illusion, I'll wire you $2 million. Michael grinned. "But if she leaves you before the time is up, you lose." Nathan exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers against his glass. He had done far more ridiculous things in the name of proving a point. "What's the catch?" he asked lazily. Michael's smirk widened. "You can't tell her about the bet." Nathan glanced down at the woman again, considering. She was insignificant. The challenge itself was what intrigued him. It wasn't about money. He had more than he could ever spend. It was about control. It was about bending reality to his will. He set his drink down. "You're on." The street smelled of damp pavement and old regret. Sienna Hale tightened her grip on the ragged blanket wrapped around her shoulders, willing herself to disappear into the cracks of the city. She had learned long ago that invisibility was a kind of safety. Her stomach clenched with hunger, but she ignored it. That was nothing new. The nights were always the worst, cold, endless, filled with the gnawing sense that this was all life would ever be. She had once been more than this. Once she had dreams, a job, a future. But the world had a way of kicking people when they were already down, and now this sidewalk was all she had left. A shadow moved in front of her, breaking her out of her daze, a man, tall, sharp features. Impeccable suit. He didn't belong here. People like him never even spared a glance for people like her. So why was he standing in front of her now? Sienna tensed. "What do you want?" His voice was smooth, effortless. "To change your life." She let out a bitter laugh. "Right. Because men like you go around saving people like me." His smirk didn't waver. "Not saving, offering an opportunity." Sienna narrowed her eyes. "I'm not interested." "You don't even know what it is." "I don't need to." Nathan crouched to her level, his gaze steady. "Marry me." Sienna blinked. For a moment she thought she had misheard him. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Marry me. 3 months. You'll have food, shelter, clothes. And when it's over, you'll walk away with $1 million. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "You think this is funny?" "No." His tone was completely void of humor. "This is a business arrangement. You help me, I help you. Simple." Sienna wanted to scoff, to call him insane, but the weight of hunger and exhaustion held her in place. $1 million. It was an impossible amount. More money than she had ever dreamed of. Enough to erase the past, to start fresh, to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. But there was no such thing as free money. Her eyes flickered over him, searching for the catch. "Why me?" she finally asked. His answer was cold, Because you were here. Sienna's stomach churned. She should have said no. Every survival instinct screamed at her to walk away, to ignore whatever sick game he was playing. But then she thought about the cold, about the nights spent sleeping on hard concrete, about the constant ache of hunger clawing at her ribs. She exhaled sharply, and against every logical impulse, she nodded. Nathan had expected resistance. He had expected drama, complications, endless hurdles to overcome, as he forced a woman like Sienna into his world. What he had not expected was how silently she followed. The car ride to his penthouse was suffocatingly quiet. She sat stiffly, clutching the clean set of clothes he had given her, her eyes darting between the window and the leather seats as if expecting someone to wake her from this bizarre nightmare. When they arrived, she hesitated at the entrance. The penthouse loomed over the city, sleek and modern, the complete opposite of everything she knew. Nathan watched her from the doorway. "You coming?" She squared her shoulders, masking her nerves. "I don't trust you." His smirk was effortless. "You shouldn't." She stepped inside anyway. The interior was pristine, the kind of perfection that felt untouchable. White marble floors, expensive artwork, a breathtaking skyline view stretching across the glass windows. Sienna felt like an intruder. "Bathrooms down the hall," Nathan said, already loosening his tie. "There are clothes for you in there." "Take a shower." She hesitated, then turned without another word. Nathan exhaled, watching her disappear into the bathroom. Something about her unsettled him. She was supposed to be desperate, compliant, a blank slate he could mold into whatever he needed. Instead, she looked at him like she was waiting for something, not for a prince to rescue her, not for kindness, for the catch. Nathan smirked to himself. She was smart. He just hoped she wasn't too smart. Sienna stood under the hot water, feeling layers of filth melt off her skin. It had been too long since she had felt clean, too long since she had allowed herself to look in the mirror without flinching. When she stepped out, she found the clothes he had left for her, soft, expensive fabrics that felt foreign against her skin. She stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like a stranger, and maybe that was a good thing. She had spent so long being nothing, invisible, forgotten. Maybe it was time to be someone else. When she stepped out of the bathroom, Nathan was waiting, arms crossed. "Much better," he said, his gaze flickering over her. "You almost look like you belong here." She held his stare. "I don't." His smirk didn't falter. "We'll see." Sienna had spent most of her life being ignored. She had been just another face in a crowd, another lost soul that people stepped over without a second glance. But now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she was being watched. Every movement, every word, every breath. Nathan was observing her, studying her as if she were a puzzle he intended to solve. It made her skin prickle with unease. The next morning, she woke to an unfamiliar ceiling, wrapped in sheets so soft they felt unreal. The bed was too big, the room too quiet. She sat up slowly, her fingers gripping the silk covers, half expecting this to have been a cruel dream. But the reality was far stranger. She was here, in his world, and she had no idea how to survive it. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She tensed. "Get dressed," Nathan's voice called from the other side. "Your transformation starts today." Sienna inhaled deeply. She had agreed to this. She had walked into this willingly. But that didn't mean she wasn't terrified. She found clothes neatly laid out for her, a soft cream-colored sweater and a pair of tailored pants. When she slipped them on, they fit perfectly, and she wondered how he had known her size. The thought unsettled her. When she finally emerged from the room, she found Nathan waiting in the kitchen, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, a cup of coffee in his hand. "You clean up well," he remarked without looking up. Sienna folded her arms. "So, what's the plan?" Am I supposed to parade around like your pet project? Nathan finally met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Something like that. She clenched her jaw. I'm not some doll for you to dress up and show off. No, he agreed, sipping his coffee. You're an investment. The words sent a chill down her spine. Before she could respond, the elevator doors slid open and a group of people stepped inside. 3 women, polished and poised, dressed in the kind of quiet luxury that spoke of old money. Nathan gestured toward them. Sienna, meet the team. She glanced at them warily. They didn't look like a team. They looked like the kind of women who could destroy someone with a single glance. One of them, a sharp-eyed woman with sleek black hair, stepped forward. Camilla, she introduced herself, her voice clipped and efficient. I'll be handling your styling and wardrobe. You'll also be seeing an etiquette instructor, a speech coach, and a body language specialist. Sienna raised a brow. A body language specialist? You need to learn how to belong in this world, Camilla said matter-of-factly. Sienna bristled. And if I don't want to belong? Nathan finally spoke, his voice deceptively calm. Then the deal is off. Silence stretched between them. He didn't need to elaborate. If she walked away now, she would be walking back to the streets. Sienna's fingers curled into fists at her sides. She hated this, hated how easily he could trap her with just a few words. But she wasn't stupid. She had already spent too much time surviving on scraps. If she was going to do this, she would do it her way. She lifted her chin. Fine, let's get this over with. Camilla gave a tight smile. Good, let's begin. The day was grueling. Sienna was poked and prodded, measured and analyzed. She was made to stand in front of a mirror, while Camilla and her assistants circled her, discussing her best features and the parts that needed softening. She has striking eyes, one of them commented, but the posture needs work, another added. She slouches too much. Sienna clenched her teeth, resisting the urge to walk out. She had spent years being invisible, and now these strangers were dissecting her like she was a project to be perfected. It was humiliating. The etiquette lessons were no better. She was taught how to walk, how to sit, how to place her hands in a way that exuded elegance. She was corrected when she spoke too casually, when her accent revealed the rough edges of her past. By the time she returned to the penthouse that evening, she was exhausted, her body aching from the endless drills. Nathan was waiting for her in the living room, casually flipping through a file. He barely glanced at her when she walked in. How was it? He asked. Sienna dropped onto the couch, kicking off her shoes. Excruciating. He smirked. You'll get used to it. She scowled at him. I don't want to get used to it. This isn't me. Nathan finally set the file aside and looked at her. It will be. If you want to survive here, you have to play the part. Sienna exhaled sharply, pressing her palms against her eyes. And what about you? Who are you when no one's watching? Nathan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. That's not your concern, he said smoothly. Sienna studied him. You don't let people in, do you? His jaw tensed slightly. That's how you stay untouchable. She shook her head, leaning back against the couch. That's how you end up alone. Silence settled between them. For a brief moment, it felt like something fragile had cracked open. But then Nathan stood, straightening his cuffs. Get some rest. Tomorrow is another long day. Sienna watched as he walked away, disappearing into his room. She should have been relieved that the conversation was over, but instead, she found herself wondering what kind of man Nathan Blackwood really was, beneath all the control, beneath all the power, and more importantly, why did she care? Sienna had thought she understood what she had signed up for. She had told herself that this was just a temporary arrangement, that she would endure it for 3 months and walk away with the money that would change her life. But as the days stretched into weeks, she found herself drowning in a world that did not belong to her. Her transformation was happening too fast. The clothes she now wore fit her as if they had always been meant for her. The way she walked, the way she spoke, the way she carried herself. It was changing. The woman she saw in the mirror each morning was not the same woman who had once huddled in the cold, invisible to the world. And yet, no matter how much they refined her edges, no matter how much they polished her into something presentable, she still felt like an imposter. Nathan, on the other hand, was unchanged. He remained the same sharp-edged enigma, always watching, always calculating. He had made it clear that she was just another project, another piece of his carefully controlled life. But sometimes, when she caught him looking at her, she saw something else, something he was careful to keep hidden. One evening, after another long day of etiquette lessons and wardrobe fittings, Sienna found herself alone in the grand library of the penthouse. It was the only place she had come to enjoy in this world of wealth and excess. The towering bookshelves, the scent of aged paper, the quiet. It made her feel safe, even if only for a little while. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, letting herself forget, just for a moment, that she was here because of a cruel bet. "You're not reading," Nathan's voice broke the silence. Sienna turned to see him leaning against the doorway, watching her with that infuriatingly unreadable expression. He was still in his suit, though he had loosened his tie, the top button of his shirt undone. It was the most unguarded she had ever seen him. "Maybe I just like the smell of books," she said, turning back to the shelf. Nathan stepped into the room, his movements slow and deliberate. "What were you looking for?" She hesitated, then pulled out an old, worn book. She ran her fingers over the cracked leather cover before holding it up. "This one." He studied it for a moment before raising a brow. "Wuthering Heights?" She shrugged. "I used to read it when I was younger, before things got complicated." Nathan crossed the room and took the book from her hands, flipping through the pages. "You like tragic stories?" Sienna let out a soft laugh. "I guess I relate to them." Nathan's eyes flicked to her, but he said nothing. He closed the book and handed it back to her before walking over to the bar cart in the corner of the room. He poured himself a drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass. "Why did you take the bet?" Sienna asked suddenly. Nathan paused, his fingers tightening around the glass. "Why does it matter?" She leaned against the bookshelf, crossing her arms. "Because I want to know what kind of man willingly plays with other people's lives for entertainment." Nathan turned, his expression unreadable. "You assume this was about entertainment, wasn't it?" He took a slow sip of his drink before setting it down on the bar. "Michael challenged me. He thought I couldn't do it, and I don't like losing." Sienna shook her head. "So this is just another competition to you?" Nathan exhaled through his nose, as if debating whether or not to answer. Then after a moment he said, "At first, yes." His honesty caught her off guard. "But things change," he added, his voice quieter now. Sienna frowned. "What do you mean?" Nathan studied her for a long moment before shaking his head slightly. "Forget it." She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "No, say it." Nathan's gaze flickered with something she couldn't quite place. He opened his mouth as if he was going to say something, but then he closed it again. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice controlled once more. Sienna clenched her jaw, frustration rising in her chest. "You know what, Nathan? I think you're afraid." That made him stop. He turned his head slightly, his expression darkening. "Afraid of what?" "Of feeling something real," she said, her voice steady. "You control everything around you. Your business, your money, even me. But you can't control emotions, can you? That's why you keep everyone at a distance." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Be careful, Sienna." She took another step closer. "Or what? You'll shut me out?" You already do that. Silence. For a brief moment, the air between them was heavy, charged, with something unspoken. Then, just as quickly as the moment had come, Nathan pulled back. You don't know anything about me, he said coldly. Sienna felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. Maybe not, but I know one thing. You're just as trapped as I am. Nathan's expression flickered, just for a second. But it was enough. She saw it. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the library, leaving him standing there alone. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she told herself she didn't care. She told herself she didn't want to understand Nathan Blackwood. But deep down, she knew that was a lie. Sienna had never felt more suffocated. Days at the Blackwood estate stretched into a routine that felt almost too perfect, too controlled. The grand halls were always spotless, the meals timed to perfection, the staff moving about in silent efficiency. She was given everything she could possibly need: designer clothes, an unlimited credit card, a personal stylist. But none of it felt real. None of it felt like hers. And then there was Nathan. He was always there, but never truly present. He would check in on her progress, making sure she was attending every etiquette lesson, every social gathering, every carefully curated event designed to transform her into the perfect wife. But outside of that, he was a ghost. Their conversations had been brief since that night in the library. He had pulled away, retreating into himself, reinforcing the walls she had so briefly seen crack. And as much as she wanted to tell herself she didn't care, she did. She hated that she did. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of preparing for an upcoming gala, Sienna found herself outside on the terrace, seeking air that didn't feel so heavy. The night breeze was cool against her skin, the city skyline stretching endlessly before her. She closed her eyes, trying to remember what freedom had felt like. You're avoiding me. The deep voice startled her. She turned to find Nathan standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his dark eyes unreadable. He had shed his usual suit jacket, his sleeves rolled up, a rare glimpse of something less polished. Sienna let out a small, humorless laugh. I didn't think you'd notice. Nathan stepped closer, his presence unnerving as always. I notice everything. She studied him, the way the dim lighting softened his sharp features, the way his expression was calm but his posture tense. She had spent weeks trying to understand him, but he remained a mystery, a puzzle missing too many pieces. Why are you here, Nathan? She asked, exhaustion creeping into her voice. Do you need to check if I'm still playing my role correctly? His jaw tightened. That's not why I came. Then why? He hesitated for a fraction of a second, so brief she almost missed it. You seemed upset earlier. Sienna let out a dry laugh. That's funny coming from you. You don't care about things like that, do you? His expression darkened. You think I don't care? She took a slow step toward him, her pulse quickening. I think you like control, Nathan. And caring about something, caring about someone, that would mean giving up control. You don't do that, do you? Nathan's gaze flickered. Something unspoken passing between them. He was silent for a long moment before finally speaking, his voice quieter than before. Control is what keeps everything from falling apart. Sienna frowned. Falling apart? Nathan exhaled sharply and turned away, gripping the edge of the balcony railing. You wouldn't understand. Then make me understand, she challenged. He was quiet again, and she thought he wouldn't answer. But then, almost reluctantly, he spoke. My father built everything I have. Every dollar, every deal, every rule. His rules. I learned early on that emotions made you weak, that if you let yourself feel, you'd be destroyed by it. Sienna felt something shift inside her. She had always known Nathan was cold, but she had never stopped to wonder why. She took another step closer, her voice softer now. "And do you still believe that?" Nathan's fingers tightened around the railing. He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was laced with something almost imperceptible. Doubt. "I don't know anymore." The admission caught her off guard. For the first time, he wasn't the arrogant billionaire, the untouchable enigma. He was just a man who had been taught not to feel. Sienna swallowed, her own walls threatening to crumble. She had spent so long thinking of him as the villain in her story, the man who had bought her, shaped her into a pawn for his own amusement. But now, standing there in the moonlight, she wasn't sure what she saw anymore. Him. The truth of him. Nathan turned then, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I told myself this would be simple," he murmured, "that you would be nothing more than a bet." Sienna's breath caught. "But it's not simple anymore, is it?" she whispered. Nathan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something dangerous, something neither of them had expected. Sienna's heart pounded. She had a choice. She could step back, pretend none of this was happening. Or she could take the risk, the terrifying, unpredictable risk, of letting herself see Nathan Blackwood as more than just the man who had trapped her. In this world, she didn't know which scared her more. Nathan exhaled, breaking the moment. "You should get some rest." Sienna nodded slowly, though rest was the last thing on her mind. As she walked away, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, whatever had begun between them, it was only just beginning. Sienna had always believed that silence could be comforting, that it could be a sanctuary when words became too heavy. But the silence in the Blackwood estate was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Days passed in a blur of rehearsed conversations and carefully orchestrated appearances. She attended the gala Nathan had insisted upon, played her part flawlessly, and smiled in front of the cameras. To the world, she was the perfect wife of a billionaire, poised, elegant, untouchable. But beneath the surface, something was shifting, something neither she nor Nathan could name. She saw it in the way his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. She felt it in the way he hesitated before leaving a room, as if there were things he wanted to say but couldn't bring himself to. The distance between them was no longer about disdain or obligation. It was something else. Something fragile. One evening, unable to stand the weight of it any longer, Sienna found herself wandering the halls of the mansion. The air felt heavy, pressing against her skin as she moved through the dimly lit corridors. She wasn't sure where she was going until she found herself standing outside Nathan's study. The door was slightly ajar. She knew she shouldn't, but something pulled her forward. Inside, Nathan was sitting at his desk, his head bowed over. An old book. His suit jacket was draped over the back of his chair, his sleeves rolled up, revealing the tension in his forearms. There was something unguarded about him in that moment, something vulnerable. Sienna hesitated before speaking. "You read?" Nathan glanced up, surprised to see her there. His expression was unreadable, but he didn't send her away. Occasionally, she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I wouldn't have guessed." He set the book down. "Because I don't seem like the type?" She studied him. "Because you don't let people see this side of you." Nathan held her gaze for a long moment before exhaling. Old habits. Sienna walked closer, drawn to him in a way she didn't fully understand. "And why do you keep them?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, his eyes dark and contemplative. "Because they protect me." Sienna sat down across from him, her hands resting on her lap. "From what?" Nathan hesitated, as if weighing whether or not to answer. Then finally, he spoke. "From disappointment, from weakness, from caring too much." His words settled between them like a confession neither of them had been ready For our Sienna inhaled slowly. You think caring makes you weak? Nathan's jaw tightened. I was taught that it does. She studied him, seeing past the layers of arrogance and control to the man beneath. And what do you believe? Nathan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her in a way that made her feel like she was being unraveled, like he was trying to understand something he had never allowed himself to before. I don't know anymore, he admitted quietly. The honesty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Sienna leaned forward slightly, her voice softer now. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Nathan exhaled, his gaze searching hers. Maybe not. A silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the suffocating kind. It was something else. Something charged, something alive. For the first time since she had stepped into this world, Sienna didn't feel like she was merely playing a role. She felt seen, and she wasn't sure what scared her more, that Nathan was beginning to see her too, or that she wanted him to. She stood abruptly, her pulse racing. I should go. Nathan didn't try to stop her. He simply watched as she walked toward the door, his expression unreadable. But just as she reached for the handle, he spoke again. Sienna. She turned, her breath catching. Nathan's fingers tapped against the cover of the book he had been reading. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had met under different circumstances? Her heart pounded. All the time. Nathan nodded slowly, something unspoken passing between them. Sienna swallowed hard and left the room. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing that everything between them had changed, and there was no turning back. The night air outside the Blackwood estate was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the gardens. Inside, the house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the wooden floors beneath Sienna's bare feet. Sleep had evaded her, and after an hour of tossing and turning, she had given up entirely. The weight of the last few weeks pressed against her chest, a constant reminder that she was living a life that was never meant to be hers. She found herself drawn to the library, a place she had only been in once before. It was one of the few rooms in the mansion that felt untouched, as if time had forgotten it. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books that looked more like decorations than something truly lived in. But tonight, there was something almost sacred about the silence here. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, trailing the dust with her fingertips. Her mind was restless, tangled with too many thoughts, of Nathan, of the bet, of the way things between them had begun to shift in ways she hadn't expected. She had told herself that she wouldn't fall for him, that she wouldn't be fooled by fleeting moments of vulnerability. And yet, she had seen something in him these past few days, something real, something unguarded. She reached for a book, at random, pulling it from the shelf just as a deep voice interrupted the quiet. You're up late. Sienna turned sharply, her pulse spiking at the sight of Nathan standing in the doorway. He was dressed more casually than usual, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the top, his sleeves rolled up to his forearms. The dim lighting made the sharp angles of his face look softer, almost human. I could say the same about you, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Nathan stepped further into the room, his gaze flickering toward the book in her hands. You read? She arched a brow. Surprised. Maybe, he admitted. I didn't think you'd be interested in something like this. Sienna glanced down at the book's cover, a classic novel, something timeless. I didn't think you would be, either. Nathan smirked, but didn't argue. Instead, he moved to the small bar cart by the window, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. The ice clinked softly against the glass as he took a sip, watching her. Something keeping. You up? He asked after a moment. Sienna hesitated, then sighed. Everything. Nathan leaned against the edge of the bar, tilting his head slightly. Be more specific. She swallowed, gripping the book a little tighter. You, for one. His expression shifted. Something flickered in his dark eyes, something unreadable. He didn't speak right away, as if waiting for her to explain. Sienna exhaled sharply, frustration simmering beneath the surface. This isn't what I expected, Nathan. I knew this arrangement would be complicated. But I didn't expect... She stopped herself before the words could spill out. Nathan set his glass down with a quiet clink. Didn't expect what? She met his gaze, heat rising in her chest. I didn't expect you to be more than the arrogant, heartless man I thought you were. Nathan went completely still. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The air between them felt charged, like a storm brewing in the distance. Then, slowly, Nathan pushed away from the bar and crossed the room toward her. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that always unsettled her, the kind that made her feel like he already knew what she was thinking before she even said it. "You think I'm not that man anymore?" he asked, his voice quieter now, more measured. Sienna's breath hitched. "I think you want to believe you're not." Nathan was close now, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of his cologne, something dark and intoxicating. He studied her, as if trying to decide whether or not she was telling the truth. "You don't know me, Sienna," he murmured. "Maybe not," she admitted. "But I see you." Something flickered in his gaze. Something vulnerable. Something fleeting. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. Nathan exhaled, his jaw tightening. "Go to bed, Sienna." The dismissal stung more than it should have. She swallowed hard, nodding once before turning to leave. But just as she reached the doorway, she hesitated. Without looking back, she said softly, "You can keep pretending you don't care, Nathan. But you and I both know that's a lie." And then she walked away, leaving him alone in the dimly lit room, the silence heavier than before. The sun was beginning to rise over the Blackwood estate, casting golden light through the towering windows of the mansion. Sienna sat in the garden, her arms wrapped around herself as the cool morning air brushed against her skin. Sleep had become a distant memory, and she knew it had nothing to do with the luxurious bed she had been given. It was the thoughts in her mind, the war in her heart, and the man who had become a storm in her life. Nathan Blackwood had once been nothing more than an arrogant billionaire to her, a man who had placed a cruel bet on her life. But in the weeks she had spent inside his world, she had seen sides of him she never expected. He had begun to change, or perhaps he had always been this way, simply hiding beneath layers of control and detachment. And now, after everything, she didn't know what to do. The soft crunch of footsteps against gravel made her turn. Nathan was walking toward her, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "You're up early," he said as he approached. Sienna let out a quiet breath. "I could say the same about you." Nathan sat beside her, leaving just enough space between them. He stared out at the horizon for a moment, as if trying to gather his thoughts. "Sienna," he said at last, his voice quieter than usual. "I need to ask you something." She turned to face him, her heart pounding. "Go ahead." His dark eyes locked onto hers, searching. "Why did you really stay?" Sienna's breath hitched. She could have given him a simple answer. She could have told him that it was because of the money, because of the security, because it was the easiest path forward. But those things weren't the truth anymore. The truth was far more dangerous. "I don't know," she whispered. Nathan studied her for a long moment, and she could see the hesitation in his gaze. He was afraid just as much as she was. And then, finally, he spoke. "I ended the bet," he said. Sienna's eyes widened. "What?" Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "It doesn't matter anymore. The money, the challenge. It was all meaningless. I called Michael and told him I didn't care about the terms of our deal. Sienna swallowed hard, her chest tightening. Why would you do that? Nathan hesitated before answering, his voice lower now, almost vulnerable. Because you were never supposed to matter, he admitted. But you do. Sienna's pulse raced. For so long, she had convinced herself that she was just a pawn in Nathan's game, a bet, a challenge. But now, sitting here, watching the way he struggled to put his emotions into words, she realized the truth. She had changed him. And somewhere along the way, he had changed her too. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. Then, Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "What is this?" Sienna asked cautiously. Nathan handed it to her. Proof. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the paper. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the official document confirming that the bet had been cancelled, the money forfeited. Nathan had truly given it all up. She looked up at him, emotion swirling in her chest. "Why are you showing me this?" Nathan exhaled, his voice rough. "Because I need you to believe me." Sienna clenched the paper in her hands, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had spent so much time resenting Nathan, hating him for what he had done to her. But now, for the first time, she saw the man he was becoming. A man who was willing to change, a man who was willing to fight for her. She bit her lip, her emotions a tangled mess. "Nathan." He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. "Just tell me what you need, Sienna," he murmured. "Tell me how to make this right." Her chest ached with the weight of everything. She had spent so long running, building walls, convincing herself that love was something she could never trust. But maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. Sienna inhaled deeply, searching his face for any trace of deception, any lingering arrogance. But there was none. This was real. "I don't need grand gestures, Nathan," she said softly. "I just need you to mean it." Nathan's fingers tightened around hers. "I do." Sienna exhaled, a small, shaky smile forming on her lips. For the first time, she believed him. The days that followed were different, lighter. The tension that had once filled the mansion was gone, replaced by something new, something fragile, but full of possibility. Nathan no longer carried himself with the same cold detachment. He sought Sienna out more, found reasons to sit with her, to talk, to understand. And Sienna, she stopped running. She allowed herself to trust. Their relationship was not perfect. It would never be simple, never be easy. But it was real. And for the first time in her life, Sienna was ready to believe in something more than just survival. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker, in the distance Nathan turned to her with something unreadable in his expression. "There's one more thing," he said. Sienna raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" Nathan reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Sienna's breath caught. "Nathan." He opened it slowly, revealing a delicate diamond ring. "I know this wasn't how things were supposed to happen," he admitted. "I know I don't deserve you, but if you'll have me, if you'll stay, not because of a contract, not because of obligation, but because you want to, I want to do this the right way." Sienna's heart clenched. For so long, she had feared love, feared trusting someone, feared believing in something she couldn't control. But this man, the one who had once been nothing more than a cruel bet, had proven to her that change was possible, that redemption was real, and that love, it was worth the risk. She took a shaky breath and met his gaze. "Yes," she whispered. Nathan exhaled, relief flooding his expression. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, holding her close. And for the first time in her life, Sienna knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not as a bet, not as a challenge, but as the woman who had changed everything. The Carney mansion, once cold and empty, was now a home, and Nathan Blackwood, the man who had once lived without love, had finally found it. Sienna and Nathan's journey teaches us that transformation is possible, but it requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to face our deepest flaws. Love is not built on grand gestures alone. It is nurtured through trust, forgiveness, and the choice to grow together. Nathan's arrogance and Sienna's distrust could have kept them apart forever, but instead they challenged each other, forcing one another to become better versions of themselves. This story reminds us that people are not defined by their past mistakes, but by the steps they take to make things right. No matter where we come from or what we have endured, we all deserve love that is real, not transactional. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels our passion to bring you more powerful, emotional stories. Stay tuned. There's so much more to come.